Welcome to the Femsplainers. I'm Danielle Crittenden, and I'm here this week with my our first in-studio guest in several months, really, at this point. And that's because the studio is in my house that I share with the writer David Frum. And he's joining us on the occasion of the publication of his recent book, Trumpocalypse: Restoring American Democracy. And I'm going to give you like 3 lines, David, to summarize that book, because then we're going to go personal. So welcome to my home office, where you visited many, many, many times.
I often deliver coffee here.
Well, today you've actually delivered gin and tonic, which is very nice.
Well, because it's Memorial Day weekend.
Right.
And we're remembering that we were on C-SPAN together on Memorial Day weekend when we first came to Washington.
This would have been, I know we were just talking about that it was the old Brian Lamb show, Washington Journal, which was the most watched show in Washington, I think, after the Sunday morning shows, right?
Yes.
And we were pretty low on the broadcasting pecking order.
As being invited to be on the show on Memorial Day would attest.
Right. And I think also because Brian Lamb figured we were Canadian, that we were
working. It's like Jews on Christmas, Canadians on Memorial Day.
And they did this. Back then, I guess I was editing the Women's Quarter, this magazine in Washington, and you were, of course, writing. And they had us on as a husband-wife team, but it was a very unnerving show to go on because Brian Lamb was so...
Well, Brian Lamb, who's a Navy man, had a keen interest in military history. And that day he decided, and the appeal of the show is always his interest would sort of wander. He was a very incisive person, but that day he decided he was interested in Canadian military history because he knew he'd come from a distinguished Canadian military family. And he had all kinds of questions about the Canadian contribution to the Korean War, to the 2 world wars. And we could never actually then get to what we wanted to talk about because we were...
Well, the format was that you would come in and you would have sort of the news items of the day that had interested you.
Yes.
But he was, I guess properly talking about military matters, but he decided I was the Canadian military expert. And as we say in our household, if you want to talk about world affairs, the nation, politics, you go to David. If you want to know what women are thinking, you come to me.
Well, a few other things too.
But I was not but it was, what I loved about being on TV with you is I could just keep saying, well, Brian, that's a really interesting question. David? And the questions were like, so Danielle, and he had this completely straight manner and you never knew what he was going to ask. He said, so Danielle, so how many war dead were there on the Canadian side of the Korean War? It's like a great question, Brian. David? So anyway, so we're back together recording this on Memorial Day weekend with our gin and tonics and celebrating really both finishing this book and the launch of this book, because this week,
Tuesday.
Yeah.
I don't know that we
celebrate this podcast.
I don't know that celebrate is quite the right word for a book launched in the middle of a pandemic.
Called Trumpocalypse.
Yeah, commemorate maybe. So this is, as you know, the second of a 2-part series on the Trump presidency. The first book with a blood red cover was called Trumpocracy. I should have brought that upstairs with me.
Well, it's okay. The people listening to this on a podcast won't notice that it's not there, but you will be able to watch this on YouTube and see my office.
And then volume 2, Trumpocalypse: Restoring American Democracy. So it falls into 3 parts. The first part talks about exactly what has happened, the failures and failings of the Trump presidency that brought about this pandemic and apocalypse. The second is an assessment. One of the arguments over the Trump presidency is how much damage did he do? How successful was he? Did the institutions hold? And I take the view that he did much more damage than people are comfortable accepting. So I review that. And then the last section, we talk about, well, are there ways forward? Because I wrote the book presuming he would lose in the 2020 election. I wrote most of this book assuming that the trouble that was coming would be a recession because of the trade war and possibly a shooting war with Iran, but that something would happen. I didn't expect what did happen. And then how do you go forward from there? And so the last half of the book offers ways to go forward to reknit American nationhood and to find some way that Americans can at last possibly even forgive one another and act like a people again.
Well, the last time you were you've been on the podcast, I think 3 times, but
Yeah.
fully, the first time was June of 2018 to talk about our 30th wedding anniversary. And then that was a very personal, but also, I guess, personal, but general about marriage and
Yeah.
in modern times. Then again, last year, 2019, on Valentine's
Yeah,
Day,
that's a
where
searing memory where we
we,
we
we
nearly
gave
destroyed
we gave catastrophic
marital advice.
romantic
Yeah, yeah,
advice to
yeah.
one of our listeners. But now so this is like the third full interview that you will have been here for. And coming through quarantine and talking about people talking to each other again,
Yes.
or coming together again after this election, how are they going to come together after quarantine?
Right.
And,
Right.
and one of the subjects, at least of interest to our femsplaining audience, is you have a lot of thoughts on not just the breakdown between partisanship between Republicans and Democrats, but between men and women.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting.
Well, the book, I talk early in the book about some of the fault lines that were political resources for conflict type politicians like Donald Trump. And so I go through a list of them, but one of the conflicts, one of the gaps is that between men and women. Among Americans under 30, the percentage of men and women who are living apart, who are living unpartnered, is the highest in the history of statistics. At this point, a person under 30 is more likely to be living with a parent than to be married. And an absolute majority of people under 30 are unpartnered in any way at all. And I'm sure it's all worse because of the quarantine and the economic hardships. So men and women live apart, and therefore they think apart. They develop a lot of resentments and mistrust against each other. They develop really different almost cultures. I mean, there is that kind of bro culture, there's a woman's culture, and they don't find each other. And that expresses itself politically, which is what I'm interested in the book, but it has other huge consequences for society. And from the point of view of people who are raising young men and women, those consequences don't look that good.
Um, we've come okay through quarantine together, I think.
Yes.
Our
It's been nice, actually.
our son Nat, who is also the audio editor of this program, said I should ask you, have you improved your crumb game? Which was an awkward, because at the start of this pandemic, we recorded it. Christine and I recorded a show with John Tierney talking about how to get through this in your relationship.
There's a certain airing of grievances there.
No, it was just about how to talk to each other when you had something critical to say. And it was a very notional, it just, for example, why is it that men don't see crumbs on counters? And what would be the best way to handle these, these small Madame Bovary-like moments in quarantine?
Truth is, I mean, the secret to you is, you just overflow with kind words all the time. In fact, you do not. Maybe it's behind my back. You had to.
Well, just on the podcast.
but like that's I think one of the pieces of advice you could offer the world is that you start literally every morning. The first thing out of your mouth is something loving and affectionate, and that sort of sets the tone for the day, and that's how we keep going from there. And then and then we end the day by watching horrible persecuted citizens of occupied France dealing with life under the Nazis.
I know we've been watching this 7th season. I think I mentioned it last week or the week before. The 7th season French Village.
Yeah, it's gripping.
It's absolutely gripping. It's great that it goes for 7 seasons, because I think we're locked inside. It feels like for 7 seasons. But to go back to men and women, it is, how are they going to come together? How are they going to start talking to each other again?
Yeah.
You talk about, we're constantly worried, Christina and I, about our own children meeting people.
Look,
we might be exaggerating how bad it is.
I don't think there are people who may say, so what? What does it matter? And the human species is not going to die out. There's 7 billion people on the planet, or maybe even more than that now. They're going to find some way to reproduce, or at least enough of them will. But it does, I think it puts a stress and strain on both of them. And I think part of the thing that is young people start life with a burden of debt. Those who go to college, they face tough job prospects, and they also face a lack of economic complementarity. Increasingly, young men and women do the same kinds of work. And so that whereas in the olden days, there'd be kind of, as well as one hopes romance, there would be a kind of economic exchange that would take place. That um, the man would provide a certain degree of economic security, the woman would provide a home, and that worked out as a kind of bargain more or less well. Well, that just doesn't. When people are doing the same things in the economy, they don't need to pair up in the way that they once did, and so you get marriages that are, we hope, more affectionate. But those kinds of, I always think about, the way to think about it is, 100 people, or 100 couples, and one of the couples will be the happiest. We don't have to worry about them. And one of the couples will be the most miserable, and we don't really have to worry about them either, because they're going to split. And that what I always think, if you're going to worry about couplehood, you have to worry about like the couples between like couple 50 to couple 80, um, like on the back slope of couple happiness.
What sometimes some sociologists refer to as the good enough marriage.
Good enough marriage. And at some point, look, like the bottom 20 couples, they need to split up. Maybe even the bottom 30 couples need to split up. The bottom 4, the couples between 30 and 40, they're probably going to be worse off. And those couples now, not only are they prone to split up, they never form in the first place. And you have a lot of preventable unhappiness, but you also have a lot of economic insecurity. And you also have a lot of children who are not being made and not being raised.
One of the it's fault lines in the women's movement, in feminism, and it hasn't seemed to go away, even though, as you point out, so many men and women are just doing the same thing, is this struggle between the at-home mother and the working mother. And this is something I wrote about in the 90s, as part of 70s feminism. We recently talked about Phyllis Schlafly versus in the ERA in the 70s, women in the 70s. And it always comes down to, well, it's really nice if you can stay home, if you have that choice, but most women don't have that choice. And it is always put in this either or way, and now as a thing of great privilege that women stay home. But how that wasn't always true. And talk about that.
Well, look, we're at a period where everyone is home. And,
well, we're all stay-at-home moms now,
and that's causing some tensions, and you can sort of observe this. And I really worry when people come out of quarantine whether we're going to have an epic of great divorces, because you have couples at home with children. We have grown children, and it's lovely. In fact, they make dinner, they clean up. But imagine if they were 5 and 6 and 8 years old.
Oh no, it's we talk. They are the heroes of this. No, the parents of 2 and 3-year-olds.
But it is. Women end up doing more. Many women end up being angry about doing more. Many husbands feel like they're in a situation where they didn't sign up for, and it's a tremendous test. And this is the thing, and I think it comes as a surprise to a lot of married couples, where the woman ends up finding, because the children drag her, because she is dissatisfied with her husband's efforts, or she just feels the commitment, that she wants to be, she's the mother first and he's not the father first. And that leads to, I don't know, I think when we come out of it, that's going to be one of the casualties, along with the loss of schooling for a whole cohort of young people. And I worry about that. We're going to have a lot of, I think just think about how much social organization it takes to do a Zoom class, and especially with kids in middle school. I mean, people from tougher backgrounds, those kids are going to lose the year. And the kids who lose the year, they're probably going to drop out of high school.
I want to take it. No, it's true. Although the good thing is that the generation is getting Zoom schooling, is the most socially media proficient, more so than their teachers, as we've seen in our own house. But no, I'm talking about this greater idea of conservatism and marriage. I mean, you've been a conservative.
So have you.
Your whole life.
when we met, when Danielle and I met in 1987 during the Reagan administration, we probably should stop admitting that at some point. You had an Ollie North sweatshirt, which
I know. It was semi-ironic, sort of jokey. I bought it in Provincetown. It was bright pink.
Yeah, but you were. We're both. Maybe this is something worth talking about. So we were both children of the Reagan era. We were very politically conservative,
which was weird for our time. Like we were the Never mind. The Alex B. Keaton's
Oh,
of
yes.
our
Yeah, but
generation.
there was a lot of in that group. There's certainly more of it than there is now, and
Meaning that you were
the Cold War generation. We
Cold
knew
War generation, but many, and certainly growing up as we both did in Toronto and Canada, pretty much everybody we knew was politically liberal. Not in my family, but
maybe different for you than for me, because I had lots of people in the conservative world, especially on the Cold War issues.
well, this was by the time you're in college, though.
Yes.
Yes.
As a high schooler, yeah, that was more odd. But so we went through this. So we had I think we voted more or less the same way in every election through our lifetimes, and then this Trump phenomenon comes on, and we've seen this. Like Trump sort of activates something in cranky middle-aged men. and we won't use names, but we have seen this with many of our friends where, wow, I didn't know you could be that big a dick. I've always wanted to be a bigger dick.
No, I'm not. I don't think any of our friends are big dicks. I'm sorry.
Ex-friends. I didn't know you could do that, but evidently you can.
What do you mean? Give an example.
I'm not going to give an example.
No, I don't mean of a person, but like of an action that reveals the Trump supporter with it.
I think there are men in my cohort who watch Trump's behavior and find something just liberating about it. They look at it and think, wow, when I'll give you, so here's an example. So just a couple of days before you and I record this, that Donald Trump was explaining why it was okay for Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, to use public resources to walk his dog and pick up his dry cleaning. And it's like a massive abuse, and it's quite improper. And in defending him, Donald Trump said, look, he's on the phone. He's making deals. He's talking to world leaders. I don't want him to have to get up and wash the dishes if his wife is away and is busy. And now the presumption, of course, if the wife were at home, there'd be no risk, because then she would wash the dishes, obviously. And
I remember you. I think you were reading that late at night, and I came into your office to say goodnight, and you told me that, and it's rare my jaw hangs open for such a long time.
But we don't need to talk about one more minute about
no, but
Trump.
You mean there are men, but you say it's a certain 50, 60 something man who says, wow, if I could talk to my wife that way.
No, I just feel good knowing that there are people in the world who still talk that way. Okay. It isn't they dare, but that they find it exciting and emancipating that there's somebody who is that. And I think that's a part of his appeal to a certain type of man.
Well, and also on issues of immigration and race and
I don't think they care that the people I'm thinking of, I don't think they might even disagree with him.
Okay. And I was talking about general appeal, but yes.
But here's the thing I wanted to put to you. So we have gone through, a lot of these changes together in tandem. And we find ourselves now, as we advance in years, both of us, I think, a lot less conservative than we were when we were young.
I think that's true.
And which is sort of contrary to what was supposed to happen.
Well, but I guess what you mean by conservatism, and if it's, Trump dickism, if that's what being conservative today means, then obviously we're not. And part of it too is, I've always wondered how much mellowing is because we've just gotten older. Although some people, I mean, maybe some people mellow and other people
become
don't.
much more crotchety.
Maybe there's a path. But, you have to hope you choose the mellow route. But
I don't remember our appearance on that show, that Memorial Day
I just
show.
remember, the only reason I remember is being so stricken by all the questions that were given to me.
But I'm sure we were there to talk about the middle 90s, and we were also agitated by culture war questions.
Right, because it was Bill Clinton.
And you look back on that and think, well, we were so, and you and I were recently at an event with someone who is a person much younger than ourselves, who recently become very conservative and who's terribly worried about the culture and the influence the culture will have on this person's small children. And I remember thinking, I mean, if I read things I wrote at the time, I see that I was worried about something called the culture, whatever that meant. And I now feel like, and I'm now almost 60, and I'm worried about a lot of things. I'm not worried about whether music videos are going to make are going to
corrupt our children.
corrupt our children. Partly because music videos, I guess, are extinct, but
It's MTV.
right.
You could just turn that channel off.
But there is, we know people who are agitated about these things all the time, and I think you and I just there are things we were agitated about, but not those things, and it's an interesting thing just to go to, I mean, and I don't want to make a point about politics, it's more a point about couplehood. Like, what happens if when one of us had zigged, the other of us had zagged? Where would we be then?
Ooh, I think we'd be quarantining in different houses. No, I want to go back to the parent thing and the culture, because that's really interesting. That's true. I think in that instance, that is less about politics than experience after 3 children.
Yes.
And I think what was interesting about the Clinton time, where it was the first time, you will of course correct me if I'm wrong, but where, I mean, on cable television,
Yeah.
a president is being asked minutely about his sexual affairs in the Oval Office. And Clinton was just a way better womanizer than Trump.
Oh, yeah.
And he was publicly less gross about it. But nonetheless, you had this sense, and our children were like, oh, I don't know, 2 and 4, 5, what would they been? But they're very, very young. And you had this feeling like every time you turned on the television, like if you weren't guarding it, there would be all kinds of crazy salty talk coming across the news. But you had that sense of, like, I mean, as you say, there was something called the culture. It was out there. You had to close your windows against it because it was always trying to get at you and your family values. And maybe it's I mean, look, you once said, when something I thought was so profound about parenting: children are deaf, but they see everything. And having come through 3 children, you sort of realize, look, teach them manners, to help them realize who they are. But trying to change who they are is very, very difficult. And they take their cues from you.
Yeah.
And if you are, it really won't matter what comes at them, through the open window.
Yeah.
They're going to be shaped by the people who love them, their peer group. I mean, that's a general statement. Politically, though, there are, I feel that fear of the culture has shifted much more to the religious.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the religious have always had that feeling, but that sense that values are under siege, that only someone like Donald Trump, of all people, can be your cultural savior against what?
Against what?
Against what?
Yeah.
But it is a culture war. But what is that culture war that they're fighting now?
I find it not only hard. I find it so hard to understand because, so we had a friend who was a journalist here in Washington for a time, who had this hilarious description. He had 3 small boys. And he said, we have 2 girls and a boy. He said, you have no idea what it's like to be the father of 3 boys. He said, they fight about everything. So I was in the park with them, and I turned my back for just a minute. And I came back, and the 2 older boys were in a fight, and I pulled them apart, and I said, what are you fighting about? And one of them had picked up a leaf, and the other one had wanted the leaf. He said, you're fighting about a leaf? Seriously, you're fighting about a leaf? And they're like throwing the punches at each other. So we're having a culture war, but whether in a time of pandemics, you should wear, in a time of a respiratory infection communicable by airborne droplets, whether you should wear a mask. And people respond to this not by saying, well, Dr. So-and-so says the mask only blocks 60% of the droplets, and that's not very effective. Well, Dr. this and that says yes, but if you multiply 60% times 1 million people, that's a substantial enough reduction to be worth the slight inconvenience. That's not, we just have, and people have just decided that's it. It's like belief. I'm going to punch somebody in the head over whether or not, and people have literally been shot because customers come into stores, say, I don't want to wear a mask. The guard who has to enforce the rule says you must, and they produce a firearm and bang.
Yeah. But that's that sense of culture war, to go back again to marriage, I think at the time then to sort of the traditional marriage as we knew it maybe had sort of clung and stumbled into the 90s, more or less. Um, that women going into the workforce, which they were doing,
Yeah.
but you had this sense that divorce was rising. There were, that single motherhood and father were sort of being celebrated. It was the big era of put your kids in daycare, and so you felt like, I know that women at the time, like me, felt like, well, if you chose not to do that, you were somehow letting down the team.
Maybe there was a feeling, and maybe this is what we had. Maybe this is something that is going to be true of every age cohort, and you just then age out of it. But you have this feeling when you're in your early married life, in your early family life, that a lot of things are up for grabs. And there's the truth is, yes, they are all up for grabs, and they're going to be decided by you, by the two of you.
Well, also by your generation. It's also the young frontiersmen.
But maybe that's what the argument is about. The culture war is about and you want to think, well, maybe if I can just control what's on MTV, then the choices we are making inside this house will somehow be easier. And what you discover as we've aged out of this is it doesn't matter what's on MTV. I mean, they could be running the Donna Reed show 24 hours a day. Your family life will not become any more predictable. It will not become any more predictable than it was if they are showing people gyrating and what is the song in music video still on MTV was the woman wearing a snakeskin mini skirt.
Still on MTV.
Right, that's already it's already an old person thing. Even to be aware that there used to be a time,
right.
An old person thing. So people are looking for reassurance, and they are trying to project their uncertainties onto the world, and then you come through it. And we've got children who are adults, and they've gotten through that process, and we've gotten through it. And you think, I don't know that different programming decisions by MTV executives would have made our life any easier or any harder.
Okay, but to go now to a cultural conservatism for today,
yeah,
because and to go back to my question about the same question for women, do you stay home? It seems like a red herring. It's not the question that most women face today.
Right.
As you say, a lot of people are living alone at unprecedented rates. What would a cultural conservatism that helped family, that helped young people, encouraged marriage, what would that look like today, do you think?
Okay, I worry about this a lot. So it would say, okay, our goal is as a society to promote marriage, to promote childbearing, and to promote work. So one of the ideas that is out there that I really dislike is this idea of a universal basic income. It was promoted by Andrew Yang during the Democratic contest, and that's an income that everybody would get. It wouldn't be that big. I think he was talking about $1,000 a month, but it would put a floor under everybody, and it would be paid to people whatever they did. And one of the things I think that the American social welfare system gets right is it tethers benefits to work. So the United States has something called the Earned Income Tax Credit, which tops up your earnings if you work. But if you don't work, you don't qualify for the Earned Income Tax Credit. So making sure that people work, and rather than and are encouraged to work, incentivized to work, and attaching rewards to work is important. Encouraging marriage and family formation. That's going to mean, I think, we're seeing one of the big discouragements of this for the young is the crushing burden of college debt. And many of the Democratic candidates talked about dealing with this by forgiving portions of the debt. But the problem is that just encourages bad practices by the colleges. If you tell the colleges you can inflict debt on people and the government will later forgive it, there is no limit to the amount of debt. I think the basic college pricing model is we want all the money you can possibly find. and then
And
all
then
the
some.
money that any level of government will give you, and then all the money that any bank will lend you, and we'll take it all. Thank you very much. I mean, because the real cost of education rises and rises and rises, and some of that is driven, you know, by a deeper macro change where for the state college system has the cost Medicaid, which is the healthcare program for the poor and for nursing homes, and it's paid for with a complex formula that approximately half the money is paid by the states. And as that program has become more and more expensive, states have covered their Medicaid costs by shrinking their support for higher education and also shrinking their support for roads and bridges and things like that. So you'd have to, if you could suppress the growth in healthcare expenses, that would give states a little bit more room to fund their state college systems. But there are other things going on too. And I think we should be thinking not how do we subsidize students to subsidize colleges, but how do we bring college instruction into the digital age and make it cheaper? How do we introduce price competition among
Well, they might
colleges
be
and
doing
universities?
that by doing
Yes.
Zoom on
Well, this
classes
pandemic, I think
online.
this pandemic may turn out to be a big driver of that. The colleges are going. It is going to be a huge financial crisis. It's going to drive many colleges out of business, and they may have to rethink practices to be more value. Until now, it's been like the last redoubt of non-value consciousness in American life, and that has to change.
Okay, so that's a policy thing, and I want to get you off. Politics and policy. A conservatism that I remember. I'm sorry if I'm out of school saying this, but you were approached in the past year. Yeah, you are trying to get away from this Trump topic, and it keeps yanking you back by the collar and insisting you keep writing about it. But there was at one point you were approached to write a short book about conservatism. And I don't think it was like the future of conservatism. What does it mean? And so I want to, again, just broaden it away from, it's not just debt that causes men and women not to come together. That we've often remarked that ideal and idea of marriage is now to, parent family, an option for the mother to stay home. That's such an elite thing now, and that the people who have really suffered are working class families, are mothers. I mean, that sort of Fred Flintstone honeymooners. No, sorry, you're in the hot seat.
No, this is your hot seat.
What does that look like? What do you tell people? How do you, as a culture, speaking of the culture, how do you, as a culture, promote that as well?
I'm going to totally reverse this and put you on the hot seat.
I know.
Because
you're just so much smarter about these things, David Fromm. Well, I could just listen to you all day.
and poor you have. But no, seriously, I'm going to turn this on you. So, to the extent, I can talk about the macro and college debt, but to the extent these things come down to personal choices, I mean, that's the thing that you wrote about in What Our Mothers Didn't Tell Us, which you keep vowing to return to.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a different world from the world we knew in the 1990s. It's a harder world for young people. In many ways, it's a world in which their economic prospects seem cramped, in which they have this burden of debt, and in which they can't find. So how do they do it? I mean, if they're going to, we lead a pretty traditional life.
No, we don't.
No, we don't.
I don't know what you're talking about. Except for missing crumbs, you do all the housework.
So what do you say? So when what are you going to say when you revise What Our Mothers Didn't Tell Us? What are you going to tell the woman of today?
Oh man, well, I know what I tell our daughters.
What do you tell our daughters?
And I guess it's a message that could be universal, because I guess just as those inspirational talks to people who want to make something in the world, the American dream, they'll say, every political rally, doesn't matter where you come from, you have the right, you can succeed. And I think I try and teach our daughters, well, you do too, obviously, but that you should hold out for love. You should be very, um, you should plan and hope for marriage or a serious relationship very young,
Yeah.
like not to take it lightly, not to, and it's a very, I try to make it a very empowering message because it is that if you are a woman who has self-respect, who has ambition, um, who wants, who believes that this is the most important
Yeah.
relationship, and that's true, and you have often said this for men too,
Yeah.
that who you marry or choosing to marry, and who that person is the most important decision you will make, more than where you go to college, if you go to college, more than what job you take, uh, and if you're lucky, and we were lucky, and we've talked about this, of meeting very young, um, and you had the wit to decide that, you know, not to be modern about it, but that we had to get married. Because I was sort of more modern and thought, I don't know, I guess we'll just live together. Yeah, not really thinking seriously, but you thought seriously about it.
I was a very serious young man.
You're serious.
Not so serious now. It was very
But no, you're still very serious, David.
Well,
But
okay.
no, but like, okay, this is you as a young man. You understood that and you persuaded me. A lot of the young men today, those we know who shall also go nameless, that we've seen come in and out of, our daughters' lives and things, they're 12 years old.
Yeah.
They're 35, but they're 12 years old.
Well, let me ask you this, okay? And this is maybe a very practical question, a hard one. So, how you say you want to hold out for love and romance? How much love should people expect? Because so to go
quantify it.
No, I don't. They don't have measuring devices. But what I mean is, so I was talking before about the 100 couples, and okay, so we met and we were very much taken with one another pretty quickly, and so that all worked out. We didn't need advice because that was just nature taking its course. But okay, so now we go through up the bell curve from number 99, number 98, number 97, number 96, and so if two young people meet and they get along, and they're sympathetic and they have interests, but they're not raving nuts about each other, what should they do?
I don't know in the abstract what a couple that is not raving nuts about each other should do. I think what we've lost, if you want to talk about a grander cultural message, is this idea that this relationship is so primary and important. And you can make it egalitarian, man or woman, but that it is necessary. I mean, it is necessary for success in so many aspects of your life. It's necessary, it's the best case scenario if you have children. But I think that even by the time you met me, it was because you were a serious minded person, and I'd come from a divorced family. The remarriage of my mother was a very happy one, and so I had a good model of a successful relationship. But if you don't have a good model of a successful relationship, and the whole culture around you, and sorry to use that term culture, but the modern mores are telling you it doesn't matter, you can push this off forever, and it's not putting pressure at all on young, and maybe young men in particular, to settle down. And then you have to have a determination to make it work. That what I am struck by, I love reading this dating column in the Washington Post. I got to write one time.
One of your proudest moments.
Oh my gosh, there's this column where the person who's writing it, usually it's somebody who's employed by like a reporter of the Washington Post, but sometimes they farm it out, and I got to do one. I was just so happy about this. You get to matchmake. These people send in their sort of resumes and descriptions of what they like, and you get to set them up, and the Washington Post sends them out on a date. And okay, mine wasn't that successful, but and sometimes you gotta you know, you're looking at pools that I don't see which fish in here are
Yeah.
gonna bond. But what I am struck by is so many, especially the younger ones, the 20 something, they go out, they have a great time, they have shared interests and very quirky interests like comic novels and science, and in some cases you look at, there's always a photograph, you think, okay, there may have not been the physical attraction, which is also very key,
Yeah.
obviously. But even were there cases where they both express physical attraction to the other, and they had this great night, and they 3 hours later, the bar is closing and they're still there, no further contact. That's what I don't understand, that there's no effort to follow up. It's like, okay, next, swipe left. That was fun. I liked it, but you know,
Yeah.
that sense that maybe there's something better. There's no effort to, and I think in our case, I think I was open to the seriousness because I have, you know, a very soppy Disney romantic nature.
You're a very romantic person.
So I believed
Yeah.
in the concept of love, and that, so I was open to it. But maybe the problem is that so many people are just not even not open to it, not even aware of it. There's oblivion.
Yeah, it's like meal times.
What?
Well, the way we
So
no, and
where are you going with that, Dave?
Sometimes we have some of our children's friends to dinner, and we flip them out because they don't right, because
don't reveal this.
like dinner, like
we all sit down at the table together. You mean?
Yeah.
And we eat with plates and knives and forks.
Right. And mom cooks.
No. You grill.
I do grill.
You grill? No, you're seeing crumbs too. Which is a huge one of the goals of quarantine. No, but it is worrisome, and I've gleaned through our daughters. And this is something I do plan to return to writing.
Maybe the problem is you're looking at the wrong people. Maybe you need to write a book about young men. Maybe they are maybe the young. Whereas when we did this in the 1990s, we thought the young woman, she was so uncertain and questioning and had too many messages, and what should she choose? And maybe the problem today is the young man of today just. I mean, yes, he faces many external difficulties. Maybe he also needs a kick in the pants.
Well, that was the whole phenomenon of Jordan Peterson. And then the problem with, Jordan Peterson, at his best, reaching this predominantly male audience, make your bed, brush your hair and teeth, go outside. that then the problem was
he's overtaken by events. Actually, no, it's on second thought. No, all of that advice.
Just wash your hands for 20 seconds. No, but then I remember getting these when we right after, especially we had Jordan Peterson on the program, we got all these listener reactions saying, I'm so glad you talked to him, because we talked to him about love and marriage, things he wasn't normally talking about in public. And then you had all these men who said, I'm so glad you did that. I made my girlfriend sit down and watch this.
Yes.
But she doesn't like Jordan Peterson as much as I do.
Well, but he's not for her.
Yeah.
Peterson at his best, and he's in a very tragic situation right now, and he is obviously a profound intellect and person who's
he's had very difficult health issues.
He meant a lot to a lot of people, and right now he's in a very, we all hope for the best in this terrible situation. But he's not for girls. I mean, the point to these things is this is a message that young men needed to hear, and obviously it resonated with hundreds of thousands of them. And in most cases, it made them be better. So that's a tremendous.
So what would you say to young men? I gave my message to the girls.
I think I'm retired.
Now you're back.
The last time I gave advice on the Femsplainers.
No, that was a very specific couple, and you brought them together. It worked.
Well, they both reviled the advice I gave.
Right,
them, so
you put them in a Romeo Juliet situation.
I realized the whole Jordan Peterson guru line of not for me. My interests are, my way of looking at the world is too peculiar, and yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that. The next thing I want to, as you know, the next book I want to write is a history of American currency. And like I just want to.
You keep trying to persuade me it's more exciting than it sounds.
It's way more exciting subject. But I'm retreating from the whole, like, I don't think I'm going to be a guru. I don't think that's what I'm cut out to do.
All right. Well, David, we normally reserve listener questions for our guests, for our subscribers on Patreon and Glow.
I hope everyone signs up.
Yep. And Patreon and Glow, by the way, they have sent in some great questions for you, and we're going to do the special monthly exclusive broadcasts that they get by being a subscriber, and it keeps us going in this, especially in this time of quarantine. But we have some friends of the podcast who asked to give you questions. The first listener her name is B.
It's like, what's my line?
No one will know that reference, David. Okay. I think that the last initial is F. BF.
Okay. I'm braced.
Her question was, how do you balance your intense interest for the past and the very present? Now, it should be said that we know this B initial F very well. And you are her, you say you're not a guru, but you're kind of her history guru.
Right.
And I'm often passing the open door to her bedroom, and I'm hearing like the history of Stalinism taking place. So she knows, she's very influenced by your love of history. And
well, it is just the way my mind works, is that I don't think you can ever understand anything unless you understood how it came to be. And I applied this to like some pretty crazy situations. I remember when we were courting, and I came to visit you, and we started courting, but you took a job in Los Angeles, and I found Los Angeles it was the first time I'd ever been there, utterly confusing. I couldn't figure out how it worked. And I got a bunch of books about the history of the Los Angeles highway system, because it sounds wonky, pretty crazy, but until I understood how the roads had been built and in what order, I could never find where I was. And once I understood the order in which the roads had been built, then I can now find myself around Los Angeles almost blindfolded, although I don't go there very often.
And it would be very dangerous to try and do that.
Yeah, okay. But I get it. I get the city, because and that's just the way my mind works. I have to know, okay, what was here before, and before that, and before that. And so I can't think about how things are now. So I'm someone who sees in my idea, you see in 3D, if we show you a blueprint, you can see a whole building, and I just see squiggles on a page. For me, the 3D is time. If I'm going to understand anything now, I need to understand what was there before.
Well, this is one of the most impressive things about you as a thinker, and I say this putting on my objective person hat and not my wifely hat, and this is I've noticed this since I've known you, since I've met you, that you have this, aside from being this incredible reader and absorber of history and facts, you have a remarkable ability, and I think this is what BF appreciates, as everybody who knows you, that you can take masses of data and then condense them in such a way, and this would have made you in an alternative universe a great teacher, is to communicate them in such a way to make people understand them. Even
this has also led to some famous family fiascos, though. Remember when I tried to get the kids to walk the road?
Oh, okay. No, I was going to bring up, it's not great for tourism.
And it started to rain, and we were on
No.
Okay,
you have to set this up, because just as you harmlessly to anyone else, when you were studying the LA highway system, I was at work and you were in a cafe and you were buying these books and reading them. But this is one of the tensions when we go on family vacations, which maybe someday we'll do again, where that desire to look what's underneath something is, you will say, we'll be in some rural town in Italy, and the kids are, trying to swarm the souvenir shops, and I'm trying to go to the cafe, and you'll go, wait, there's a great ruin. It's very small. There's a fort outpost right here, and you'll point to it on the map and say, let's just go have a look at that. And so we'll all trek there, and there's a gas station. And you'll say, wait a second, but look, you can see the outline of the Roman wall. And we're like, Dad, this is a gas station. But no, but to go back to the complex, so different tastes on travel, but so you do have that ability to, and then you present it from both sides, that you'll say, it's not like you say, this is what happened. You'll say, some say this happened, some say that happened, different sides view this. So you also manage to see it from all sides. And I think, if I may say, that's what's made you such an effective commentator, because even if you're condensing something, there are all the layers underneath it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Well, next question.
Thank you, BF.
Okay, the next question, friend of the podcast, is from Miranda F.
It really is what's my line.
This is a person of 28 who is temporary, you've known quite well through quarantine. She is very interested in what music has influenced you and why. And one of the reasons she wanted to ask you this was because, you could say Wagner and be very high-minded, but she is always taken by your pop choices.
Yeah.
And the pop music that you
I'm not very musical. And
really?
Well, you were taking up the piano, and after after having not done it for so many years, and you're tinkling.
It's my quarantine project.
Your quarantine project, and I can't read music, and I don't really.
You're a hell of a dancer.
Okay, now things are getting ugly here. The last hour of the Jerry Lewis telethon. So music has, of the arts, music is the one that probably speaks least to me. Poetry, painting, sculpture, music is
porcelain.
Music is the one that speaks least, but there have been pop choices. So as a younger person, the Talking Heads were a band that made a huge impact on me when I was in my late teens, and I think there was something. And I'm sure,
aside from the name, and that you would become a Talking Head.
Who knew that? Who knew that?
Yeah.
But there was something about, we had the sense of the turn of the era from the 1970s to the 1980s, from all that went wrong to all that was exciting and hopeful about the possibilities of the world after 1980. And they always seemed to, that the sleekness and coolness and cerebralness of them, I really love that. I was also there for the birth of hip hop, and before it became, I think the reason Miranda F is interested in this question is that she was looking through the old vinyl collections that we somehow preserved, and she found like these records from proto hip, before hip hop was hip hop, and I had this large collection. I'm not going to forget, because I finished the gin. I'm going to forget the names of the bands, but I had the record of what was, it's losing me, but what was generally considered the first hip hop record, and I had a copy that I'd bought in 1984, whatever it was, and it was, but it was spoken word. It was poetry. I can broken glass everywhere, people on the street, and I just, that it was. So it appealed to me, not because of its music, because of its non-musicality, because these were poets speaking very rhythmically, and I love that.
What about, you also love Jimmy Cliff?
Love Jimmy Cliff.
Why?
He's also a poet who speaks. I mean, the music is beautiful, but also.
So you really listen to the lyrics.
I really listen to lyrics,
yeah.
and I remember Miranda F. She had a song. What was that band from California that that Miranda F liked so much. And
There were many bands from
okay,
California.
but
Miranda
but
F.
but
loves.
I used to complain because their lyrics, there was this song they sang, one of their big songs, and and the way they got the rhyme was by saying, they ended, but
the Red Hot Chili
the
Peppers.
Red Hot Chili, and they ended every line.
Ayo.
They added the vowel O to every line. I said, well, I can make rhymes, so I can just add the vowel O to everything.
In the snow.
Oh. That's not a rhyme.
Just so the listeners can sympathize a little with Miranda F. You're driving to school. It's 7 in the morning. You put on the Red Hot Chili Peppers on the car music, and then your dad is saying, "Why anybody could make this rhyme?"
It's cheating. It's just flagrant cheating. Lazy.
Like, Mom, Dad really doesn't like the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
And it was not personal. It wasn't an objection. I just come on, write some lyrics here, people.
All right, we had one more question for you, and then I'll have a final question for you. This is from, it's not really one of your children, but he's kind of like one of your children, Windsor M. You have to kind of say who Windsor M is, because he kind of freaks us out a bit because of his projects that he has.
So Windsor M, who does fact-checking, who did fact-checking for the late Christopher Hitchens and became very, very close to Christopher Hitchens, and wrote a book called The Quotable Christopher Hitchens, and helps me with the fact-checking. And he's apparently working on a project called The Quotable David Frum, which is just set and ready. As soon as I die, ready to go.
He waited. The Quotable Christopher Hitchens came down after Hitchens died.
No, but when he was dying, like Christopher saw it, but so Windsor's got the same.
Well, and it's scary because he comes out just out of the blue. This is how I was reminded to otherwise sort of about the Memorial Day appearance. Yeah. He texted me last night to say, "Hey, I found you guys on this," and
he's got the most retentive mind. It's just amazing.
No, but then he finds things. It's like the FBI is on your.
He's a great researcher. Yeah, okay. But he is like a Lieutenant Columbo. You don't want to you don't want to have him suspect you of murder.
Well, apparently, so he says he's collecting all your quotes, and you just feel like he's wanting you to die.
I don't think he wants, because there'll be more quotes, but I think the book does not acquire any commercial value as long as I'm here.
Anyway, he watched this appearance of us, and apparently we treat, also part of the Washington Journal was the listeners, or the viewers would write in real time and throw questions at you, which Brian Lamb would then read to you. And apparently we triggered so many, what the hell is a Canadian doing, commenting on American wars and history. And apparently somebody, at this time you were still a Canadian citizen, somebody asked if you would become an American citizen, and you said, "I won't. I regard myself as a visitor here. I think of myself as a visitor and as a Canadian." So Windsor M's question to you is, what changed your mind, and why this Canadian pride in the 90s?
Oh.
And this will get to the essential thing about you, which most people don't know or factor in, is your deep Canadianness.
Yes. Well, I've actually written about this, and I wrote about it in the book I read about the Bush administration.
The Bush
administration, where that was a 9/11 experience where I suddenly felt things that were precious to me under attack, and I suddenly felt that Washington, a city we both have a very ambivalent relationship to, for better or worse, it wasn't my hometown in that sense, but it was my home, and violence was being done to it, and I had to take a stand here. And so, but for 9/11, I don't think I would have done it, but 9/11 was what did it, and the aftermath of that, and that sense of, I remember on the day of the attack, we were evacuated, and it was a crazy day, and I won't tell the whole long story, but we ended up in many different places. But I finished the day in an office building in the center of town, where we established communications with the rest of the team, and we did our work, and that's where I found out Barbara Olson had been killed, and prayed for her, and uh, and then I came out at some late hour of night, and the military was all over the city, um, and there are barriers everywhere, and you saw the flags still flying, and you that tomorrow they'll be at half staff, but tonight they're still flying, and you had the sudden sense of, my God, there's a war on, and I'm sort of part of it, and I can't be a bystander to this. I can't be a spectator.
Well, and at that point, you were working in the White House
Yeah.
for the president,
Yeah.
but while retaining.
And it was
Canadian.
weird. That was a weird thing, being a Canadian working in the White House. I don't want to say it's utterly unprecedented, but it was certainly very, very unusual.
But you went to college here.
Yeah.
You were long drawn here, and I know it caused your mother much distress.
My mother, who was an American citizen,
right, and she
lived in
right,
Canada. So
right.
we're border crossers, and my mother's mother was an American citizen who lived almost all of her life in Canada. So
there was a draw. There was like a moth to the flame.
Right. But in her case, there was a repulsion. She was born an American citizen, and she lived in Canada. But yes.
So why? They blame me. You blame me. You tried to blame me, because I always, for as long as I could remember, wanted to live in the United States.
Well, I always blame you because we have a friend, I won't name him, who quotes what is supposedly an Italian saying, that every man needs a wife because many things go wrong that can't be blamed on the government. But I don't know. That's a complicated question, and maybe this is too late in the broadcast. But and what you find also is, at different periods in your life, you have a different relationship to the two countries. And right now, I mean, America is such a source of anguish and worry to me, that it's a painful question. And you know, that you see. I mean, all the great. And this is something I try to say when I talk outside the United States. I guess I did some talks in Germany last year, and I hope to be back when we can. I just try to tell people, the America you believe in, the America that you love, the America that you admire, it's still there. And maybe I'm talking to myself too, and promising myself that country is still there, because sometimes you watch what is happening now and you wonder, is it still there?
Right. And that sense of pulling together, which I had always admired about the Americans. I mean, I felt like I spent, and I don't know, I couldn't explain this either, why I spent my entire childhood with my nose against the glass, partly because everything you watched on TV was American.
Well, that's what we did our first date together, remember? Our first evening date. We ended up on the Scarborough Bluffs.
Oh, yeah.
Looking out across the lake, and I didn't realize how nearsighted you were.
This is so embarrassing, this story. We went to this, so it overlooks Lake Ontario, and across the bay the lake is Rochester, Buffalo and Rochester. And I said, as we were sitting romantically in the grass looking across the lake, I said, "Aren't the stars bright tonight?" And then you looked at me and you said, "That's Rochester." And I realized it was maybe I should get my vision examined. But no, it's true. I mean, you just love it. I mean, when people have asked why we came here, and I said, well, we were both writers and journalists, and if you want to comment, if you need to be in Rome to comment on Rome. You wanted, and you particularly wanted to be part of the wider world, and that drew us first to New York and then Washington. Now Canada's looking pretty good.
Yeah. And then maybe someday we'll and be in a narrow world back on that side of Lake Ontario in Prince Edward County, raising donkeys.
That's your dream. You love donkeys. That's a little known fact about you. And I'll be looking out across the lake and
with better glasses.
better glasses, and saying, doesn't Rochester look bright tonight? All right. Well, David, I really appreciate you coming all this distance, walking up the stairs.
I just want to say to anyone who's watching this on YouTube that we're sitting in Danielle's office, and my office is one floor directly underneath this space, one floor down.
Right.
And
sometimes you bang the ceiling and tell me to keep it down.
Keep down the dancing. Yeah. Well, that's when you wear the stiletto or something.
But yeah, we do work together. We've always worked together, and I've always equated it to
my grandparents when they
Your
owned the shop.
grandparents, when they had the little From Modern Grocery on College Street in Toronto, and they sold, was, you know, it was before Koreans, Vietnamese eventually took this over,
They
but
sold bananas and tinned beans.
and they worked together, and I feel like we're From Modern Grocery, except we churn out words and ideas rather than bananas and tin goods. But anyway, well, thank you. Thanks, honey. Good luck with your book tour, as it were, next week.
No traveling, no frequent flyer miles, unfortunately. So that means there's no vacation at the end of it.
Yeah. Well, there may not be a vacation at the end of it anyway, but thanks for joining us. And those who are subscribers, I just want to remind you that we will be asking David your questions. And if you love the podcast and want to support us, please consider doing it at patreon.com/femsplainers or at glow.com/femsplainers. And yes, thank you. And we'll see you next week.
Okay. I didn't look at the camera at all, which was probably a mistake, but